afternoon. As you just heard, my name's Simon Davis. I'm the Managing Director, EMEA at Quartz, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you all here to the second annual Quartz Africa Innovators Summit. Quartz is a digitally native global business news brand that launched in September 2012. We are there as a guide to the new global economy and written for, read by people who are truly excited by change and innovation. And you can find us wherever you are in the world, whatever device you're on, whatever platform, just typing in qz.com. We launched Quartz Africa in June of last year. Quartz is a mobile-first news brand. So when we see things like 80% of people who live in sub-Saharan Africa already own a mobile device, that number will continue to increase up to maybe just under 1 billion before the year 2019. It's really clear that we should invest in our coverage coming from the region.
Okay.
So we launched the site. It's gone pretty well. We're really pleased with the traffic. The traffic has almost doubled in the last year, or more than doubled in the last year to the site. Also, we've got new initiatives, such as the Quartz Africa weekly brief email. I hope many of you already have signed up to that. They haven't. Possibly. You can either go to the site and sign up for the email there. If you don't manage that, come and see me afterwards and I'll sign you up personally. We also have the Innovators list that we launched, and obviously this summit. And all those things are there to acknowledge and share the exciting work that's going on across the continent. I've got a few thank yous to start off with. First of all, to thank the 8 speakers that you'll be seeing this afternoon. Also to our partners in the event, that's Livestream and Gong Communications. And finally, everybody who's attending. That's either people here in the room in Nairobi or those joining us from around the world on Livestream. Just a couple of points before I leave the stage on housekeeping. First of all, if you want to share things on Twitter, see the things you hear and see, we do have a hashtag. It's not there, so I'll say it slowly. It's hashtag QZ Africa Summit. QZ Africa Summit. The final thing is Wi-Fi. So when you came in and sat down, there should be a bag on your chair. Within there, there's a slip of paper, and in that slip of paper should be everything you need to get onto the Wi-Fi here at the hotel. If the bag's missing, the slip's gone missing, you have any problems at all, please go and see the guys on the registration desk and they'll be happy to help you out. So that's all in terms of introductions. I now want to turn it over to the editor of Quartz Africa, Yinka Adegoke, who is going to tell you more about the programming today. Thank you.
Please welcome on stage Yinka Adegoke, editor of Quartz Africa.
Welcome again to the Quartz Africa Innovators Summit. We're delighted to be back in Nairobi. It's a little bit cooler than we expected, but we're still delighted to be here. As Simon was saying, we launched Quartz Africa last year, and we said right from day one that we wanted to tell the story of Africa through the lens of innovation, and to talk about that innovation, explain what's going on. But of course, innovation doesn't happen without people. People have to innovate. It's not just something that comes out of the air. And that led to us starting to think about an event where we could have a platform for people to come and tell their stories and come and inspire other people, other innovators, about what they've done. Tonight this evening we have a range of speakers who include several people who have inspiring stories. We'll be speaking to, for example, Winifred Selby, a young Ghanaian who started her business at just 17, manufacturing bamboo bikes, because she was trying to solve a problem of students like herself or farmers who had difficulty getting from their homes back to the farm or vice versa. We'll hear from Wilfred Indifum from Cameroon. He's an immunologist, and he solved an intractable problem which had confounded scientists around the world for over 70 years. And I'll let him explain it because I can't explain the science. We'll also hear from two very inspiring political activists. Boniface Mwangi, who some of you who are here in Kenya are very familiar with, and he's a 2015 Africa Innovator. He was here last year. And we'll also hear from our new friend, Smokey, from Burkina Faso. Both of them are inspiring figures in the way they use media and music, particularly in the case of Smokey, to organize and inspire people to political activism. But these aren't the only stories you'll hear this evening. You'll hear several others. I can promise you that every story you hear will inspire you because of their creativity, their bravery, the way they've approached problem solving and pushing boundaries. I can also promise you that everyone who speaks this evening would probably have written their own speech. Actually, I can't promise that, but you know, that was too easy. I had to do that joke. Please join me in congratulating the 2016 Africa Innovators. And now we'll welcome up our first speakers. Okay.
Please welcome Boniface Mwangi, founder of Power 254 and Smokey, hip-hop artist and co-founder of Label I Citoyen.
Guys, thank you both very much for being here. What we do with this format is we try and get people to really, just like I said earlier, just tell their story. But I want to kind of switch it around a little bit, and I just want to first off acknowledge Smokey for being here this evening, because he's flown in from Burkina Faso, and he just found out when he got here that his studio, where he does all his work, frankly, his life's work, has mysteriously burned down again for the second time. And we, personally, from Quartz, all of us, we really appreciate the fact that you could still be here and do this for us. Thank you very much. So just to stay with you, Smokey, and just so everyone knows, Smokey is predominantly French-speaking, but we're going to work with you on this to tell the story. How did, you've been a hip-hop artist now for nearly over 20 years now, and you've started out with these songs that kind of made people aware of the situation in Burkina Faso during the days of Compaoré, and which led to you being an organizer. Can you just talk us through the short version of how you made that transition from just pure musician into an organizer?
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me, and sorry about my English, because I used to speak French. I'm going to try. There is somebody come from here, a great person called Jomo Kenyatta. He said that, talking about colonization, is that first of all, when the white people came in Africa, they got the Bible and we have the lands. So they learned us to pray with closed eyes, and when we open our eyes, they got our lands and we got the Bible. So I think that's the same today. Today that's the same thing, with politicians. They learn us. They build mosques, they build the church, they build nightclubs, people dancing, singing, praying. And when you open your eyes, they got the power, they got everything, they got the money, and you don't have anything to eat. So that's it. First of all, as I say every day, every time, before being an artist or an architect or journalist, you are a citizen. You're born as a citizen. And as Norbert Zongo, the journalist get killed in 1998, said, you don't have any future in a country who doesn't have any future. That's making sense.
Yes.
So if you want to have a future, you have to take care about the environment
Yes.
where you are living, That's what making me make the step, create the thing, being an artist and being a citizen defender, fighting for human rights, because you are also responsible about what you're saying to the people, what you're talking to the people. If you say alternance is good, you have to respect human rights, you have to respect democracy rules. If you just sing this in your song and you doesn't do anything, don't move any finger, it's not sounding real,
Yeah.
So you have to do it. That's why we get on the ground now, and we were obliged to.
Yeah. How did that? I mean, that's so true, because obviously we think about many of the. If I think about my youth and think about the songs of anti-apartheid and what have you, but not a lot of people were actually doing anything as such. But tell me about how you decided to make that change yourself when you. I mean, I don't think it was a change, but just a progression to organize people to come out, particularly in the run-up to 2011. Have I got the year right? 2011?
Yeah, 2011. Yeah, but we're starting in 2010.
Okay.
Meeting students, university, making some debates, projecting some movies, especially engaged movies, asking some questions. And after the movie, we're talking with the people. We're talking with the people watching the movies. And we're talking also about our reality, our problems, And we even run in all the country, all the villages, talking with the people, and sometimes doing some concerts with the people, using the ludic thing to how to say that, to increase the engagement of people, uprising. And this worked. This make me face about the real problem of the population, especially
in the rural areas.
In the rest of the country, not only the capital.
Okay.
So in 2011, the ex-president Blaise Compaoré gets chased by his own military guard from his palace. So that was the good time to act.
Right.
But what is very surprising, for the first time in our story, in Burkina Faso, because we have a big story of fight, and heard about Thomas Sankara, for example,
Yes.
and nobody have been reacted except the political parts. They made a meeting called a Blaise Dégage, Blaise Kick-Off, something like that. So I was ready with this message. So I was on this place of revolution, but all the syndicates and most of the civil society, they have been boycott this event. That's why making think about, if you want to go somewhere, you have to give yourself the how to say that, the way to
You have to create the routes yourself.
to go there. So you don't, because most of the time we were waiting for the political parts to organize something,
Right.
for the civil society, the basic classic structures to organize things. Now we're deciding to organize it ourselves. That's why we have been creating the Ballet Citoyen, to be sure that this fight,
Citizens Broom.
Citizen Broom. This fight going to be until the end, to eat the fruit of this fight. Because it's not, what is important, of course, is fight. But if you fight every time and you don't eat any fruit of this fight, I think you can, you're gonna let down this fight,
Yeah, you're gonna give
That's
up.
why it was very important for us to go until the victory. and we have been chased bus compared all the people of Burkina Faso, and we're proud of that.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
that's the time to watch as a good sentinel, to be sure that everything is going to be respected, and to be sure that a new class of politicians, the young one, because they are more important, 65% of the population going to take this power, the power of this country to change everything and to change fatality.
Let me, I'm going to come back to you because I want to get into some of that detail of this situation right now. But I'll just come to you for a second, Boniface. Since you were last here and we last spoke, how are things in Kenya right now in terms of the work you're doing?
I think very interesting. We had teachers in the streets.
Is your mic on?
Is my mic on? Oh, no, it's on. Okay. Very interesting. We had teachers in the streets, we had doctors in the streets, and then about 2 weeks ago, we had lawyers in the streets.
Right.
And before that, we had politicians in the streets. So when we started, in the last few years, people have been saying, oh, street for people who are idlers, hecklers, people who have no work to do. But we're seeing professionals getting very frustrated and going to the streets. There was a killing of a lawyer, Willie Kimani,
Yes.
his client, Joseph, and the taxi driver, Josephat. They disappeared, then killed, and evidence shows up that was done by the state and by the police. And because of that, there was a lot of protests. Like there was a week of protests where lawyers were going to go into courts. The lawyers marched in the streets, but they had a marching band. It was very bourgeois. but still, and very dignified. But still, it was an awakening that when we were in the streets and we were talking about extrajudicial killings, they thought they were safe. But now they're being killed as well. And I think that was so they're in the streets now. I think that's a very good development. We have had a lot of awareness where politicians as well, who are supposed to be in parliament passing laws, have realized that if you want electoral reforms, you have to go to the streets. They went to the streets for a couple of weeks. Some people died, which was very unfortunate. But they were able to force the government to the negotiation table, and now they're talking about dialogue before the next election and electoral reforms. So whereas people thought that protests for the uneducated and people who have nothing to do, we have seen people who have something to do and something to lose in the streets. And that's a very good thing. I'm actually happy for the movement.
Tell me a little bit about how you organize today, how you raise awareness. Have there been any changes, or have you, in terms of the platforms you use, the media you use?
We use various means. The protest is actually one of the few things that we do. I have done less than, I think, in my entire life, less than 12 protests. But we have been doing street exhibition. We did one about heroes last year, talking about men of courage. People have been there before us, people who stood up for what they believe in, men and women who stood for what they believe in, their ideals, and fought for this country through the pen, through sports, through guerrilla tactics, who were in the forest. Just tell our story, because if you go to our history books, we only have one hero, Jomo Kenyatta, who had very good words to say before he became president.
Yes.
And when he became president, he became a land grabber and a killer. And
I was waiting for that.
And some of the brightest sons, before Sankara was killed, there was Tom Mboya, Piogama Pinto in this country. Many people were killed. And the first disappearance happened actually under Kenyatta before. So it's actually a history of repression that has been there for a long time.
Right.
And so how do you organize? We use music. It's one of the tools. That's why I'm happy to share this stage with Smokey. We use the arts. We use things that you see every single day, from graffiti to music. One of the biggest songs after the Kenya National Anthem is Juliani, Nikonja. It's called what? Kenyans in the Room. I'm reminding the chorus. Utawala. Yes, Utawala is the name of the song. And it was done as a power collaboration. So we're trying to reach to people through the minds, through what they see every single day, through pop culture. Yeah. What do they see, and how do you influence that?
Is that something about the way the world has changed, that, that protest now or just raising awareness requires this kind of soft approach?
It needs to be. I think people have a lot to lose. You have a cool Instagram where you post your food pictures, and so you don't want to be interrupted with blood and other things. So they want to do things in their comfort zone. I see. They want to do things that are actually very soft. So you want them to dance to music that is revolution. You did a song called Tumechoka, which is it has a dancehall beat. You can dance in the club, but it has a message. So you're trying to get the mind first, because that's where our slavery is. We are enslaved by politicians. We have refused to think And when you see anything called activism, you block your mind because you've been taught that that is wrong. And one of the inherent things that we have in our continent is our parents taught us fear, number one, because for those who lived under repression, they were told, if you don't speak out, you're safe.
I see.
So that fear was passed on to us, that even now it's safe to protest, but you're still afraid. And so we're trying to tell them, it's okay. The lawyers are in the streets. It's okay, you can protest. It's okay to voice it. It's okay to disregard your parents' advice when it is wrong. It is okay to raise your voice to an elder when they're mistaken. Because the idea of us fearing authority is the reason why we have this stalemate. The reason why Compaore killed Sankara and stayed in power for so long, because there's fear, because when he took power, people died. And that fear of death is one of the things that we actually need to undo. Because as well, death is a taboo. It's very un-African to talk about death. When you talk about it, it's like, why are you talking about dying? I think if you spoke about death more, guys are like, oh, it's okay, we're all going to die.
I guess that brings us to one day I will die. Your ex.
Birthday video. Oh.
which is fascinating.
I did a birthday.
It's a year ago now.
Yes,
right?
actually, exactly 1 year ago. I did a birthday video about the day I'll die, and I casted my wife as one of the characters, and it was about us dying. One of the things that politicians use and other crooks use to scare you, I'm going to kill you. You're going to die. You're going to die. And the idea was, we are all going to die. So once you're comfortable with that, you're all going to die. No one is going to come out of life alive. Are we good? Now let's talk. So remove that from the table. So when they call me and say, we're going to kill us, like, okay, I'm not scared of death. Remove that from the table. And that makes you think about the bigger picture. That makes you think about legacy. What am I living for? Why do I wake up every day? Why do I go to that job? The guys that are called robots every day, they don't love their jobs. They're in suits every day. They go to the office, go back home. They hate their job. They look forward to the weekend. And I tell them, just imagine if you thought about how do I make a difference every single day. I don't have to protest. By living my life the right way, thinking about the bigger picture, then you're going to enjoy it. Problem is, we have been told, don't talk about death, don't talk about politics, don't talk about protest. And now we become slave to everyday living and paying bills. So you chase the American dream. You want to get a car and get a wife and a dog and a picket fence, all these things, all these fancy things. Then what?
We chase the American dream in Africa as well.
Yes, then what? Once you have those things, then what? And so the idea is actually...
You don't like dogs?
Actually, I have 2 dogs.
No, in my village, they like dogs in life, but also in kitchen.
That leads it. So yeah, that's the whole idea.
No, that's fascinating. I wanted to come back to you, Smokey, on your story. Through Revolution, you become an icon in Burkina Faso. People know you for helping to organize and raise awareness. And then your studio, which you spent some 20 years building, and you produce your music from it, burns down. And it is believed to be, I don't know if this was ever proven, but it's believed to be soldiers with loyalty to
the first time,
Compaore.
the first time, yeah. But before I'm talking about that, because it's amazing he was talking about fear. Every time, if that's the same problem, everywhere. As Norbert said, there is this story about the mouse. The mouse is made a meeting and trying to find a way to solve the problem of the cat, and they're discussing it. And a little mouse say, why we don't put a bell around the neck of this cat? The only way when the cat is coming, everybody gonna know. All the mouse is clapping for that, this beautiful idea. Now they're looking for one mouse to go and put the bell, nobody, and that's it. And it's very important, as another friend said, because if you protest, you die. If you don't protest, you die. So what you gonna do?
Protest.
It's better to protest.
Right.
Before getting in Burkina Faso, in Jula, we said, "Nan lara ansara." If you sleep, I don't know the meaning in English, if you fucking sleep, you're fucking dead, man. So you have to, it's better to listen, like this, like as a man. And about the studio get bombed last year after the push, the day after the push, the 70 of September by the Presidential Guard of Blaise Compaoré. They fired 2 rockets in the studio, and the studio get burned. But some neighboring, I get lucky, they have been killed with fire, but I lost a lot of materials because some people take off the materials, maybe the military also, the disc and things like that. But I was not prepared for that. And I was coming here in Nairobi, I didn't know that I'm gonna face this situation again, and this is more than before because I lost everything. All the studio is burned now. So I have to go back, but that's the risk, you know, when you acting like we acting, you know that sometimes you can lose something, you can lose life. This is not life, this is material. So, I mean, we're still alive, and this is not going to change anything about my convictions and what I have to do. I know what I have to do. I'm very determined about that, so no problem.
So we've just got about 1 minute, so let me just ask both of you, ask you first, are you optimistic about your country's future right now? How do you feel about the country?
Yeah, I'm optimistic because of the young people now starting being very watchers, you know? And, you know, first of all, we were, as I always say, we were obliged to be pessimistic because somebody say, pessimistic people inventing the plane, the parachute, and the optimistic people inventing the plane.
Right.
So we were prepared to falling down, that's why we were pessimistic.
Right.
And now I think we got a lot of credits now. For example, in this constitution, the Article 37 is sacralized. Nobody can do any more than 2 mandates. It's 2 mandates, 5 years, 2 times, that's it.
Okay.
When you left the power, you're not gonna have any chance to come again. And this is a credit of this revolution. There are also some other things like the mineral code for the people because the industry, they came in Burkina Faso exploiting the gold and the population doesn't have anything. This is kind of credit of the revolution. Some other things as the justice because there are separated powers now.
I see.
You know, before the president could nominate the judges, you know, like this is not possible anymore. But they try to bring back this old way of managing politics before the time of Blaise Compaoré, and we are not agree for that. I'm optimistic because we are still watching, and we still have credibility for acting. That's why I'm confident about the future.
Thank you. Boniface?
I think I'm very optimistic because 35%, actually 80% of the Kenyan population is under 35. We have 10 million unregistered voters who may vote for the first time next year. There's a lot of voter apathy, but if you can convince those people to vote and they vote right, things are going to change. African politics and the Kenyan politics is an extremely, extremely dirty river.
Yes. And
you can never clean a dirty river by emptying it. You can't empty a dirty river.
Yes.
But you need to add clean water into the river and you purify it. And there's need to be a push for people to vie. Kwame Nkrumah once said, seek ye the political kingdom first. There's a need for people who are clean, professionals with solutions to run for elective politics. The African problem is a leadership problem and it's a political leadership problem. We need to solve that by running for those posts. The idea of letting those people govern us and run us and complain about it is not going to change anything. So when you elect crooks and complain, it's not going to change. We need people, even if they lose actually, we need people to vie for those elective posts. The country is dirty, the river is dirty, we can't sit and complain. It's very polluted. Right. That pollution can only be fought by clean water. We need people to vie. And so the days of winning are over. I'm actually trying to push for more people to vie. Kenyan politics is very tribal. It's about what tribe or what party. But we have a new constitution that allows people to run as independents. So I'm hoping that people are going to run for independence. And I hope that next election that he doesn't just sing. He runs for office and wins.
Well, what about yourself? That seems to be the obvious.
I'm in discussion with my wife.
Listen, I want to wrap it up there. I want to thank both these gentlemen for the work they're doing, for how you inspire young people in particular, because our continent is is what, 80% under 18, something.
Kind of that here.
So we, the work you do is incredibly valuable, incredibly important. And yes, thank you very much for being here. Thank you
For having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Boniface. It's a pleasure to meet you. Nice to meet you, man.
Please welcome Wilfred Lifon, researcher at the African Institute for Mathematical Science in Cape Town, South Africa.
So since this is
I know, it's all rush. Guys, thank you so much, man.
since this is a meeting on innovation,
You're giving me proverbs, you're dropping.
I'm going to talk about something. I'm going to talk about something that I feel is quite appropriate for this kind of conference. And I'm going to make 3 main points. The first is that nature is the greatest known inventor. In fact, for those of us who believe in evolution, it's evident, this is obvious. Nature invented us. But I'm going to steer clear of these kinds of examples of nature's inventions and talk about more mundane stuff that may not be controversial. I'm also going to make the point that we can solve solutions, we can obtain solutions to society's problems by mimicking the solutions that nature has obtained to analogous problems. And not just that, the 10 point is that we can also solve solutions by applying similar principles as nature. Now, for millions of years, nature has repeatedly invented solutions to difficult problems. And it does this through mutation and recombination and natural selection. I'm going to explain what these terms mean shortly. But first, let me give you some examples of nature's inventions. So each one of us has within us something called an immune system. This is a system of cells, molecules, and organs that help to protect us against a variety of health threats that we encounter in our daily lives. These threats may be, for example, the malarial parasite Plasmodium falciparum infecting you, or it might be a cell within you that gets damaged that might cause cancer, for example. Without the immune system, we would be much more vulnerable to these kinds of threats. In fact, without an immune system, the human lifespan would be much shorter than it currently is. And nature invented the immune system millions of years ago. All animals, all organisms that have a backbone, so-called vertebrates, have an immune system. A second example I want to talk about is something called the nervous system. We know what is happening around us because we perceive certain stimuli from our environments. And the ability to perceive these stimuli depends on the nervous system. If you put something on my hand, for example, the sensation gets transmitted to certain cells, then they transmit information to my brain, and then I can interpret what touched my hand. This is how we learn about what's happening in our environment, and it wouldn't be possible without a nervous system. Without a nervous system, we wouldn't be any different from a stone, which doesn't really perceive what's happening around it. The third example I want to talk about is that of a DNA. It doesn't help, it doesn't make sense to invent solutions to problems if there's no way to transmit those solutions to future generations. Then you keep reinventing the wheel. Nature came up with a wonderful molecule called the DNA, and this DNA allows solutions that are invented today to be transmitted to future generations. Take, for example, some of us can't digest milk very well. Now, the reason is because within our DNA, which produces the different proteins that do work in our bodies, we don't have an enzyme that can digest milk, that can metabolize lactose, for example. Now, when you have an offspring, you transmit your DNA to that offspring, but you don't transmit the perfect copy. there are certain mistakes, there are certain changes, we call them the result from certain processes called mutation and recombination. And it may happen that some of these changes end up encoding an enzyme that allows your offspring to metabolize lactose to digest milk. So this change is a solution to the problem of digesting milk, and your offspring inherits it, and your offspring can transmit that solution to that problem to his or her own offspring, so to future generations. And so through this means, the immune system which was invented, the information about it is stored in our DNA, and it gets transmitted to future generations. Now, we can solve the problems we face by copying some of the solutions that nature has found to analogous problems. I'll give you the example of a vaccine. How does a vaccine work? Well, if you're infected by a virus like the one that causes measles, and you survive, then chances are very low that you'll be reinfected with the same virus and develop disease. The reason is because the first infection activates this immune system, which I talked about earlier, and creates a state which we call immunity. So you become immune to reinfection by the same virus. Vaccines try to mimic this state of immunity. So there are substances, there might be proteins, there might be whole pathogens that have been weakened in some way, and they introduce into an individual to create this immunity state so that subsequent infections would be either unable to take hold within you or unlikely to lead to a disease or death. Now, vaccines are among the greatest achievements of science. I mean, some people think it's the greatest achievement, but I think it has contenders for that title. For example, quantum mechanics is a really amazing achievement of science. But vaccines are quite amazing. They have saved millions of lives. Millions of lives. And but we have a problem because the traditional way by which we develop vaccines does not work well for many diseases. Malaria, for example, we don't yet have a highly effective vaccine against malaria. And because of that, we get at least 500,000 people dying each year. The vast majority of them are in sub-Saharan Africa, and about 90% of them are children under the age of 5. If we have a highly effective vaccine against malaria, we're going to save hundreds of thousands of lives each year. See, the same thing for HIV. We don't have a highly effective vaccine against malaria, despite many decades of research that focuses on the traditional approach, which, by the way, was invented more than 200 years ago. And the reason why it's so difficult is because the traditional approach to vaccine design, it focuses on the pathogen. You say, I have this pathogen, and I'm going to try to create a state of immunity against it. But the pathogen doesn't stay constant. It continues to change. It undergoes mutation and recombination, and it alters itself. So it's a moving target. We are chasing a moving target. In the case of malaria and HIV, the pathogens are actually running very fast away from us, and their motion is quite unpredictable. They are taking unpredictable paths. And so it's very difficult to track them down and develop an effective vaccine. Now, I'm taking a very different approach to this. I'm saying, rather than try to chase this fast-moving target, I'm going to focus on the immune system. I'm going to find out how nature solves this problem of creating immunity against pathogens. Now, if two people are infected with the same pathogen, there is some probability that their responses to that pathogen will be different. This results from differences in genetics and also differences in the environments in which we live. So if I have two people, person one has immunity to some disease and person two doesn't have immunity to that disease, the key questions I want to ask are, why is this person immune to that disease and this other person isn't? What are the key determinants, the basic determinants of immunity, what I call the immunity codes for that disease? And how can I reconstruct these immunity codes in another individual who is susceptible so that they become protected against that disease? This is a very different approach to the traditional one. And because our immune system is not as fast-moving a target as many of these pathogens that cause malaria and HIV and so on and so forth, we have a greater chance of finding effective vaccines by pursuing this approach. And I'm going to focus on the answer to question 2, how I answer this particular question. It depends on a technology that has experimental components, it has a mathematical component, and it has a computational component. And the idea is to take a sample of blood from different individuals who have different degrees of immunity against a particular pathogen, apply this technology to decipher what are the determinants of this immunity state. These determinants that we find tend to be things like proteins, for example, antibodies. But they can also be certain sensors that are found on certain cells called T cells. And these sensors go around your body looking for the presence of health threats. And if you lack a sensor that is responsible for detecting a particular threat, then you're much more vulnerable to that threat. So if we can discover what the sensor that's missing in you is, then we can recreate it to better protect you against a given threat. And so this is, and by the way, the immunity codes can be of 2 general types. There are beneficial immunity codes. These are immunity codes that determine protection against infectious agents, for example. But there are other immunity codes that determine protection against yourself. So they attempt to protect you against yourself, and the process of protecting you against yourself leads to them attacking you, and it leads to a disease, a kind of disease called autoimmune disease. And this is an example of an immunity code that we found for an autoimmune disease that affects mice. So other examples of autoimmune disease are type 1 diabetes and multiple sclerosis. So the beauty of this technology is that it allows us to identify these different types of immunity codes. One, immunity codes that determine protection against things like malaria, and that allows us to design vaccines for malaria. Secondly, immunity codes that attack you. And if we find them in you, then we know you have a certain probability of developing a particular disease over the course of your lifetime. And so once we discover it, we can tell you or your doctor that this is your predisposition to type 1 diabetes or to some other autoimmune disease. And these are the possible steps you can take to avoid developing such diseases. And I have 2 teams working on applying this technology and also developing complementary technologies, one based in Ghana, led by my PhD student, and another based in Cape Town, led also by another PhD student of mine. Now, I want to make the last point, which is that we can solve problems by applying similar principles as nature. But before I do that, let me try to explain how nature solves problems. So how does nature come up with a gene that codes an enzyme that helps you to digest milk? So to make things very simple, let's imagine that each person can have only 2 possible genes. So you have 2 genes, and each gene can have multiple variants. So many of us are familiar with something called the Cartesian plane from our math classes in primary school or grade school. So you have a plane in one dimension, I have, say, a y-axis. In another dimension, I have an x-axis. So imagine that on y-axis, I place the different variants of one of my gene types. On the y-axis, I place the variants of the different types of variants of the second gene type. So I have different variants on the different axes. So each point on this 2-dimensional plane corresponds to a particular combination of variants of these 2 different gene types. Now, in biology, we say that each gene, such a gene combination, or what we call a genotype, it contributes to your fitness. So it contributes to your ability to produce offspring that will survive. So you're fitter if you're able to produce offspring that survive to later generations. So now let's imagine that my y-axis and x-axis are all placed horizontally. And there is a z-axis that is perpendicular to this horizontal axis. And for each gene combination, I mark a point, which is the fitness, its contribution to the fitness of an individual. If you try to visualize that in your mind, you see that what I've created is some kind of landscape. There are points with high fitness, those are like hills. There are points with low fitness, those are like valleys. And so you have some landscape of the sort that I have shown. In that case, the axis will correspond to different gene variants, and then you have fitness. So nature looks for regions on this landscape that have high fitness, so for hills. So for example, the gene combination that encodes the enzyme that helps you to digest milk would correspond to one of the hills on this kind of landscape. And nature finds those gene combinations through a process called natural selection, whereby you move on the landscape through mutation and recombination that moves you on the landscape. And if your fitness is increased relative to your previous fitness, then nature accepts that change. So in the end, on average, for a given fixed environment, individuals will tend to move up this landscape, looking for genes that help them solve problems that they face, or for example, how to digest milk. I want to propose that we can apply similar principles to the search for ideas that allow us to solve some of the problems that society faces. Now, according to a celebrated philosopher, David Hume, we can categorize ideas into two types. Okay, we have simple ideas and complex ideas. Simple ideas are those that are derived directly from our perceptions of reality. For example, I feel hot, so the idea of something being hot is a simple idea. But there are also complex ideas. For example, the idea of a vaccine is a complex idea and is derived from simpler ideas based on perceptions of reality. And by Edward Jenner, in fact, I can go into more detail about that for those who are interested. So we have, I propose that there is a landscape of this sort in which the axis represents simple ideas. Each point corresponds to a combination of these simple ideas which form a complex idea, which might be an idea that solves a problem. And the vertical axis corresponds to a fitness, and this is the value that society assigns to an idea. So we assign a value to ideas, and that corresponds to a fitness. And if we think of the constituent simple ideas of a particular complex idea together with its fitness, we obtain something like a landscape. And now how do we search for problem-solving ideas on this kind of landscape? We can follow what nature does by valuing ideas objectively so we assign special status to individuals, and the ideas are conceived based on the value to society of those ideas. This is what I call objective elitism, and it contrasts with the alternative, which is subjective elitism, a notable example of which is nepotism, in which individuals are valued not based on the ideas they have, but on the basis of things like kinship relationships. If we pursue this, I believe we'll be better able to find solutions to the pressing problems that we face as society. And I can take this analogy much further by applying theory that others have developed and that I've also contributed to, which I call fitness landscape theory, and derive other implications of looking at the search for problem-solving ideas from this kind of perspective that I'm proposing. Thank you.
Please welcome Gideon Richfield, Senior Editor at Quartz.
A very interesting presentation. So we just have a few minutes, but I want to touch on this ideas landscape that you mentioned just now, because it seems to me what you're saying, if maybe there's a subtext here, your proposal for combating malaria goes against the grain of what is the current traditional paradigm, which is create vaccines based on past infections. And it seems to me you're suggesting that your idea might have more fitness, but you're going against the paradigm. How do you propose to change the way that the medical establishment thinks about this approach to malaria?
So in science, ideas that go against perceived wisdom, usually they gain traction when you have proof of concept. So having a theory and a proposal that logically makes sense is one thing, but showing people that it works is another, and that's what I think will help to move people in this direction. Because a lot of money has already been, and professional reputation has already been invested in the traditional approach, and many people, I think, are unwilling to change all of a sudden and adopt a different approach. Also, we have an advantage because this approach is made possible by interdisciplinary research. And this
You're
is
a mathematician as well as a medic.
Yes, yes. So, it's something that not many people can pursue. But hopefully, if I can show that it works, then it will encourage others to also invest the time and effort in learning and applying this approach.
Right, because you yourself did advanced studies in mathematics, and you've been applying that to the medical field.
Yes.
There's another idea that is popular for eradicating malaria, which is eradicate mosquitoes. A lot of people think that maybe that is the way to go. What do you think of that approach?
I think we need a multitude of approaches, complementary approaches. It is very important that we eradicate the mosquitoes, or that we at least reduce the ability to transmit malaria. And modeling studies have shown that that alone can drastically reduce the prevalence of malaria. Now, but I think it's, so this is something that's out there, but it seems as if the world is waiting for the magic bullet, which typically in this case is vaccines. And so we need to encourage the governments, civil society, to take leadership in applying these approaches. For example, environmental engineering that makes the environment less hospitable to mosquitoes. These approaches, there is evidence that they can substantially reduce the number of deaths that we have from malaria. We should be applying them while waiting for a vaccine, which I believe is the only way by which we'll make malaria a nuisance going forward.
But you're saying there is no one magic bullet.
No,
you need these approaches together. And so for the kind of research that you're doing and the approach that you're taking, what do you think is needed for this kind of research, not only yours but others, that is pioneering new approaches, for it to succeed, to get support, to get funding? What's needed, especially in Africa?
Okay, so even in the West, people are faced with difficulties, people who pursue the kinds of approaches I do, because the traditional funding mechanisms favor single discipline approaches to solving problems. But increasingly, we're realizing that the problems we face require multidisciplinary expertise. On my slide, I didn't talk about this point, but I said the likelihood of breakthroughs increases with the size of the idea space. This is the pool of ideas that can contribute to the solution of a problem. And this pool increases the more you bring together disciplines, you cross-fertilize ideas from different disciplines. So there is a problem with funding this through the traditional approaches, but I think the private sector has a big role to play in supporting people like me and my colleagues. And so we need people who are visionaries in the ability to realize the potential of new approaches. So we don't need visionaries just in the scientists who conceive these ideas, but also in funders, in people who see the potential and can finance it and basically go ahead of the curve before others can follow.
And when you say the private sector, like, who are you thinking of in general terms?
So private philanthropists, I think there is less of that than we could have in Africa, and we need that. We can't rely solely on philanthropy from the West. We should cultivate that in Africa, but also corporations can have a social, as part of their social responsibility, could also invest in these kinds of ideas that are not primarily meant to generate income, but to actually solve problems in society.
Right. Well, Wilfred, thank you very much for coming and speaking to us and sharing your ideas.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome Winifred Selby, co-founder of Ghana Bamboo Bikes Initiative, and Yinka Adegoke, editor of Quartz Africa.
Hello, everyone. Great to be back, and great to be back with another very inspiring person, Winifred Selby, the founder of Ghana Bamboo Bikes and Afrocentric Bamboo Bikes, and multiple entrepreneur. Oh, wait, people are amused by these photos. Thank you for being here. I wanted us to just start off telling your story, just talking about how you got started. What makes a 15-year-old think they can start a business manufacturing bicycles made of bamboo? A lot of things to get my head around.
Thank you so much for your question. My name is Winifred Selby, 21 years of age, and I'm the co-founder of the Ghana Bamboo Bikes Initiative. At the age of 15, I discovered that there were a lot of challenges that people in my country were facing. High unemployment. Farmers were also not motivated to produce more of their farm produce because they were finding it difficult to pick the farm produce from farm to the marketplaces to sell them. Because of fuel crisis also, people were not getting access to transport and all that. So I sat down, and finally students from deprived communities were walking about 8 miles to and from school every single day. By the time these students get to classroom, they might be tired. So I asked myself, if we are expecting these people to be the future leaders, because education is the key way to success, and these students are walking barefooted 8 miles to and from school every single day, by the time they get to classroom, they might be tired. Then they can lose focus even while the teacher is teaching them. So I sat there and I thought of what can I do to solve this problem that people are facing in my community. And bamboo bicycle, I am not the first person to invent it. Right. It was introduced in Africa by a foreigner with the name Quartz. So at the age of 15, when I discovered these challenges that people are facing in my community, I wanted to address that. So I had 2 colleagues, Ms. Benes Dapa and Kwame Che. 3 of us came together. We flashed back the invention of the bamboo bicycle, which was invented by Quartz, and we decided to put up an initiative that will actually address these challenges and this problem that people are facing in Ghana. It really wasn't easy though, being 15 years. One of the stories I really remember so well was when I was assigned to go to the Registrar General Department to register my organization. I was determined and I had that confidence in me. So I walked to the Registrar General Department with confidence. Lo and behold, after I explained the project to the officer, he looked at me and said, "Young girl, are you sure you have the right frame of mind? Instead of you concentrating on going to school, 15 years, you are thinking about bamboo bicycle." He didn't believe it. Right. He thought it cannot be possible because bamboo bike had 15 years, but I proved them wrong because I was determined. Okay. So that was actually the first step I took, which really wasn't easy.
So you had seen the bamboo bicycles as previously made, and you realized that bamboo was widely available in your part of the country?
Yes, bamboo, I discovered that there are raw abundant bamboo in Ghana. We have a lot of bamboo, but people don't really cherish it that much. So I wanted to take advantage of that raw abundant material, that is bamboo, by adding value to it to address the transport need of people in my country. Okay. So then you start the business, but how do you start it? So I know you didn't initially start it as a for-profit business, right? Sure. So explain to me how you come to this idea that I'm going to make it a social enterprise. I mean, how does a 15-year-old even know what a social enterprise is? It really wasn't easy when I started at 15. Right. So 2 years later, I discovered that I have to do something that will actually support what I'm doing. That was when I invented the Afrocentric Bamboo Limited. Right. And that is the profit arm of the Ghana Bamboo Bikes. So the Ghana Bamboo Bikes was established when I was 15 years. 2 years later, when I was 17, right, I initiated the Afrocentric Bamboo Limited, which is the profit arm.
Okay. So when you have the social enterprise, how does it sort of run? How do you people buy these bikes, right? And the funds go back into the existing business. How much do these bikes sell for?
Locally, we sell it for $100, but for internationally, because of the shipping and all that, it's $250 per frame.
Well, this is the for-profit bike, is it?
Sure.
Okay. So what about the social enterprise bikes, the Ghana bamboo bikes?
Yeah, for that one, because when we started, because there was no profit out of it, we did a calculation of everything, then we sell, but we later realized the business would not be able to run without getting profit to reinvest and to push it ahead again. That was why we initiated that one.
Okay. So how many bikes have you made, and how many people do you employ? How many do you make a month?
Oh, okay. Currently, we have employed 35 young women with primary or low education. Wow. We have inculcated in them the technology of bamboo bike making, and we have produced more than 1,000 bicycles, because it ranges from 60 to 100 bicycles we produce in a month.
Every month.
So to do a calculation from the age of 15 till now, we've produced more than 1,000 bamboo bicycles.
And are all the parts local? Do you source them all locally, or do you have to sort of import some parts of them?
We import some parts.
Okay. And what's the sort of share? Is it like
Sure.
50-50 or
Yeah.
something like that? Okay. So now you have this bike company, and you're getting lots of recognition for it. Tell me about your role as an entrepreneur to try and inspire other young Ghanaians or other young Africans. I mean, what kind of things have you been doing?
Oh, okay. Apart from the bamboo bicycle projects I am embarking on, I have another charitable project called the EPF Educational Empowerment Initiative. For that one, I help young women for them to get access to education without restrictions. Currently, I'm dealing with 1,000 girls. We provide them with sanitary pads, educational materials, and we also give the brilliant Benidi students scholarship for them to get access to education, because I believe that education is the key way to success. Currently, there is a part of Ghana, one of the most deprived communities, that some of these young girls do not go to school at all. It's called Sechafram District. And the reason why they do not go to school at all, I discovered that some of these young girls miss classes about 5 times during their menses because they can't get this menstrual pad, so they think they might soil themselves or all that. So I also wanted to address that problem as well. So currently I have 1,000 girls that I am dealing with.
Wow. How do you raise the funds to support them and to get these sanitary pads and the educational material?
Oh, okay. Last year, I had an award from World of Children Award in the United States. So they connected me to Procter & Gamble company. So they helped me with some of the sanitary pads, and I can also impact life of these young girls.
Oh, I see. So this brings me on to that other topic of raising funds in general. I'm interested to know how you have, through your, I guess we can call it a career, even though you're 21, I guess it's a career. Your career as an entrepreneur, how have you been able to raise funds? What has been your approach to getting people to support your business? Because you've rightly pointed out, you were so young that many people, even who have lots of life experience, struggle to raise funds. So I'm interested to hear how you've done that.
Sometimes it's really not easy getting funding outside, because sometimes your age, when people look at you, you have to sell your idea, the impact it is making to convince people. It's really not that easy, but the first funding I had was from Seed Initiative, when I was able to sell the project and the impact it has made. And in fact, they were moved and they impacted with that award, that Seed Initiative award to the project. It's really not easy getting funding.
Was that the first?
The first award I had.
How much was that for?
$5,000 US.
Okay. So you started small, and then what happened after that? Because I know now you're doing about a couple of $100,000 a year revenue, right?
Sure.
So how have you built up from that in terms of raising funds to?
Okay, some of them were from individuals.
Okay.
There are some people, when they meet me, they're like, young girl, you are making great impact. And some of the profit I get is what I also generate, and I connect it to the charitable project, the 1,000 girls I'm currently dealing with.
I see.
Yeah, so there are some individuals, when they see me, they're like, you are doing so great at the age of 21. We want to contribute to your product and what you do so that you can be able to impact life of more girls. Yeah.
And in general, if you wanted to expand your business or any other business that you come up with, because you're clearly a serial entrepreneur and always thinking of new ideas, do you think, just talk to me about how the kind of people you find out there who want to invest in business. Because it's one thing for someone to give you funds because you're an inspiring person, but it's a different thing when it's about the business and they're looking at the numbers and they're looking at what your projections are. How easy has that been in Ghana, in Africa, in general, to raise funds?
Oh, sometimes there are some programs I do apply for. Programs like Anzisha Prize. It was a competition.
I see.
So that competition, they picked 22 young entrepreneurs that are making great impact.
Yes.
So there are times when I see those opportunities out there, I try my best to also apply for some of it.
Right.
So you go and present your business plan to them, and depending on the questions that the panel of judges will ask you and how brilliant you can sell your organization to them, they can also help that.
So if you were to give advice now to another young 15-year-old in Ghana or in any other country as to how to start a business, how to be an entrepreneur, what advice would you give to them?
Okay, first of all, I will tell them that it's all about determination. Mm-hmm. You don't have to look down upon yourself, and you don't have to wait till you get huge sum of money before you start something. I was 15 years, even to pay my own school fees was a problem by then. Right. But with determination and the kind of people you associate yourself with, I always tell people that no one will understand your journey because it is not theirs to understand. Mm-hmm. You have to sit down to understand what you want to do. Think about the impact it can impact on the lives of people. You have to be so passionate about what you do. If you are not passionate, at any point in time when you are discouraged, you stop it. But with determination, ambition, and that passion, that you understand what you are doing, you will never give up. There are so many challenges you face, but no matter what, you still have to be determined. So finally, what I would like to end with is that young entrepreneurs should not always sit down and wait till they get huge sum of money before they do something. You can impact life of people in your own little way with a little thing you have.
That's a wise word.
Oh yes, you can impact life of people. It's not like about the whole world. You have to start from somewhere with the little thing you have that you think you can impact life of people with. If you come and tell me this is what I do, what is the evidence of what you do, and nobody is willing to help you. Right. But if you have been able to do something and you can tell them this is what I have done, then people will know that in fact you are a visionary person. Therefore, they can contribute to what you do. So
what you're saying is start doing something. Don't just sit down and wait for the big fund. Do you think that has become a trend or something you see out there with young African entrepreneurs?
Oh yes. Even currently in my country, Ghana, there are some of those university graduates, when they complete school, they're like, we are waiting for the government to create employment opportunity. They come together and they form an employment society. At least you've gone to university for years.
Right.
You learn something.
Right.
It's not everybody the government can provide something for you. At least for that years you were there was something you learned. So if you come back as a university graduate, come and sit down and cross your leg and form a team on employment society. Then you ask them, they tell you there is nothing for us to do. Right. We don't have funding, we don't have money. To me, I don't take that.
But do you think one last thing, do you think the government should, what can governments do? I mean, I know obviously you can talk about your experience as a Ghanaian, but what role do you think governments have in enabling or helping entrepreneurs in our various countries? I'm sure you could talk about Ghana specifically.
Yeah, what I think the government can do to help entrepreneurs is that the government has to create that enabling environment for entrepreneurs. That is the best thing they can do. They have to create that thing for us.
What if you were to just tick a few things off the box and say, tick a few boxes rather, and say, do this, do this? What 2 or 3 things you think your government could do?
Sometimes they have to encourage us, and they also have to push us with a little thing. They have to also push us with what we do.
Right. Do you ever have any issues with tax environment or that kind of thing, or,
Oh, no.
or registration, like employ people with open minds, perhaps?
Not really.
It's such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in. I think you talked a lot about passionate entrepreneurs, and I think we can all feel your passion for what you do, and that you care deeply about the work that you do, even beyond entrepreneurship. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank
Please welcome Mats, who is Managing Director of Simodisa, and Gideon Mitchell is Director of Quartz.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matsi, for being with us. So we're going now to zoom out a little bit, because we heard from Winifred, who was an example of a local entrepreneurship, a local business doing something with bikes. And for you, we're turning to a little bit more of the macro picture. What is happening with entrepreneurship across the continent? And I'm interested in your view, because Matsi has a very broad range of experience. She's worked in investment banking. She also has worked in small business coaching. Simodisa works on looking for ways to reduce the barriers to entrepreneurship. So you have a kind of very broad range of experience of the way in which it's happening and which business is being conducted. So I'm interested in your perspective, in particular in the last year or two. What are you seeing as the changes in the way that, in the kinds of entrepreneurship that's happening in Africa, and also the way that the barriers that it's encountering, how those are shifting?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a great pleasure to be here. Essentially what's happening is a testament to what my fellow innovator Winifred was talking about. Localized entrepreneurs that look around their communities to find solutions. I can make an example of the type of entrepreneurs that I work with in South Africa. One of them is Shezi from Livestock Wealth. So cows in African tradition, especially in South Africa, is a form of wealth, and it's an asset. So he's basically taken that concept and has decided to create a business model around digital cows. So he's created an app, and he's also created a website where you can actually buy cows. So that's an example of looking at your community and basically ensuring that you can commercialize on that. Another example is a young guy, a young chap. His name is Witness Ndaka, and he's created a business model around in townships in South Africa. There are things that you call townships, communities, and there are families that have homes, but behind their homes there are rooms that they would like to let out. So a lot of the interventions or innovations are assimilated by the likes of the Ubers and the Airbnbs, but basically formulating localized examples. So a lot of that is happening. And then also I've seen in South Africa that the expansion plans of some of the small businesses is no longer within South Africa. They're basically looking beyond the borders. Example is Zona, which is a Cape Town-based startup that has looked beyond South Africa for its expansion. They're doing pretty well in Zambia and Malawi, and then they'll also be expanding in Mozambique. So there's a lot of businesses that are seeing the opportunities outside their countries.
Right. And so are these businesses also making more use of technology than they used to, or is there some other shift?
Sure, I think technology is definitely an enabler because it has scale and people are able to utilize it. And it's a connector as well. So we basically still do need to do a lot of work in more underserved communities by getting them to be digital, by utilizing technology to be more efficient. Like if I speak to my mother who lives in the rural part of South Africa, she would tell me that a lot of entrepreneurs in her community are born before technologies. So they are BTTs. And so there's a lot of interventions that we have to do as Simodisa, the organization that I represent, around how do we ensure that economies are more inclusive and entrepreneurs feel that they are part of this big shift that's taking place.
Right, so maybe as a sort of a segue into talking about what Simodisa is doing, can you talk a bit about the kinds of problems that the entrepreneurs you talk to are encountering these days?
Basically, the common problems you would find access to markets. So that's why we have to broaden our horizon in terms of markets. What markets are available? South Africa is too small now for entrepreneurs. They have to basically look outside into the continent. Access to funding. We have a huge funding gap. I mean, in South Africa, there's a lot of development funding institutions. However, in the space of startup and seed and there's not a lot of money in there. So we have to promote the culture of venture capital. We have to grow the venture capital industry and also start educating wealthy individuals, because there are some wealthy people around angel investments and having networks of angel investors.
Right. But is that changing also? I mean, the problem of lack of funding has probably been there for a while. Do you feel like it's improving?
I would say it's improving because we've been able to identify what the issue is. The fact that if I'm a young entrepreneur and I'm looking for $100, there's not a lot of people that will be able to give me, especially institutional funding, that will be able to give me that kind of funding. If you're looking for $10,000, $100, that's much more, $100,000, that's much more acceptable, because then there's more access to growth funding and accelerated funding. So the funding spectrum is still very limited at the beginning when you have an idea.
Right, so people are looking for almost micro seed funding.
Absolutely, and that's the biggest need right now. But we encourage people to, entrepreneurs to, bootstrap, because there's not a lot of people that are willing to put money down. And we ask them, are you willing to put your own money down? So in the initial stages of starting your business, we encourage you to bootstrap, go to friends, family, or fools, because those are the people that would naturally give you money.
Which one is the most abundant?
Well, I would say fools.
So, I mean, your slides have been popping up and down. I don't know if we have access with this thing. It might work. But do you want to talk a little bit about how Simodisa works and what you're doing with people?
Well, Simodisa is an industry association for entrepreneurs, by entrepreneurs, and we aim to be the golden thread that connects our South African entrepreneurship ecosystem. Entrepreneurs don't exist in a void. There's a lot of dynamics at play at any given point in time. For example, you've got the government, you've got the funding institutions, you've got the local and international markets, you've got everybody, but somehow it has to be synchronized. So Simodisa is a synchronizer. So we basically look at policy and regulation that governs entrepreneurs. We do a lot of research around the space. For example, on the screen, we conducted a study last year around the top 25 constraints surrounding entrepreneurship, and the 5 overarching constraints were skills deficit. We don't have enough people that can actually start and run businesses. They have ideas, but the ability to actually run those businesses are very limited. Hindering regulation and policies. In South Africa, we have great policies, but they're not necessarily properly implemented. So government needs to play a better role at implementing these policies and also offering incentives. For example, tax incentives for those who are willing to risk their money and invest in small businesses. And then limited availability of venture capital. As I said earlier on, there's a huge gap in terms of funding. There's a lot of money for businesses that want bigger amounts, but then at the startup phase, there's not a lot of money in that regard. And then public and private sector disconnect and trust. We believe that, the government has a role to play, but private sector also has a role to play, and they need to essentially work together, and then low tolerance of risk and failure. So the culture of being entrepreneurial is quite limited. So we need to get people to have and see local heroes that have actually started businesses, because we have a great country. It has wonderful infrastructure. However, we are not necessarily profiling and celebrating those entrepreneurs that have started those industries that are running our economy.
Right, and so how do you go about Intermediates of tackling these particular problems?
Well, I think it's a function of engaging the government and ensuring that whatever policies they've put in place, it is important that, for example, we have what you call Black economic empowerment and preferential procurement, meaning that the government needs to ensure that they procure a lot more from small businesses. They allow small businesses to participate in corporate value chains. And also we have what you call enterprise and supply development, meaning that big companies now have an incentive to actually develop small businesses, train them, and ensure that the quality of products and services that they offer are sustainable, and also the business in the process is able to grow. So that's basically a government's role, is to be, create the right policies, education, educating entrepreneurs, or ensuring that we have entrepreneurship in the, in the curriculum, so that at a young stage, young people can actually learn about entrepreneurship. And also, I think it's also important that we're able to ensure that the skills required to run businesses are actually in place.
Right. So, I mean, these are, great general principles, and I'm wondering if there are any specific examples you can point to of things that have gone well, that are lessons that South Africa has for the rest of the continent, for instance, and like advances in the way that any of these things have been overcome.
We've done a lot in terms of, well, there's what you call the Section 12J, which is an incentive for investing in small businesses. Well, it's an incentive, a tax incentive for putting that risk capital in small businesses. So it's something that was established in 2007. It took a lot of engaging the private sector and the public sector and ensuring that it actually does work for those who are going to put in money. While also South Africa, I would say that it's good in ensuring that we've developed a Ministry of Small Businesses. Right now, it's still in its process of defining its identity, but we have to use that particular ministry as an aggregator of information, of opportunities for small businesses, because there is a lot in place. There is a lot at play. Private sector is investing a lot of money in terms of encouraging small businesses in their value chains, but it's been very difficult for entrepreneurs to navigate the space. That's why Simodisa exists, because we feel that all of this information, all the opportunities has to be aggregated so that entrepreneurs are able to navigate through the system.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about this question of finding markets outside the country, because I guess my question is how practical is that? So, my background is this is actually my first time in sub-Saharan Africa. But I used to work in Latin America, and there was this sort of myth that Latin America was, well, almost everybody speaks Spanish except for Brazil. Surely it's all one market, but actually people found that the continent or the region is a bunch of separate markets, and pan-Latin American business initiatives were very hard to pull off. And I imagine that might be even more the case in Africa. So what kinds of companies are able to do a pan-regional strategy, or how do they go about it?
Well, for example, Zona, which is that Cape Town startup that I mentioned, they've established themselves in Malawi and Zambia, and they're going to go into Mozambique. And basically, they are a money transfer business. The concept is technology-based, and essentially, they have looked at local communities, and they've ensured that how they're going to expand is by engaging young entrepreneurs, by selling this business concept to them and giving them ownership of their own local markets. So ensuring that they're not coming as South African entrepreneurs going into foreign markets and trying to do things in a South African manner, but learning about the environments that they're entering and ensuring that local people have local ownership around the idea. And it's also a very localized solution to transferring money. So just know your market, and also partnerships are very, very key. You can't go in there as South African without a local partner or engaging local individuals or local entrepreneurs.
Right. And do you think that South Africa has a particular advantage in this respect? I mean, that South African companies have a particular advantage in this respect?
In terms of the technological know-how, yes. I mean, industries such as retail, services, financial services, South Africa is quite strong in that regard. These are the emerging industries that are doing very well and contributing towards our economy and our growth domestic products. So now the next frontier is the continent. If you look at one of our big retailers, in South Africa, ShopRite Checkers, if you look at Pick n Pay, the other time I went to Mauritius, and basically I felt like I was in another colony of South Africa, because at one point in time, there were all these South African retailers. So it's about how do we now expand what we have been able to do, because South Africa has become a smaller market, but our expansion definitely has to involve Africa.
Right. I don't know how much you are traveling around the continent yourself these days. I don't want you to draw comparisons you're not comfortable with, but I mean, first of all, what are some of the most interesting things that you have seen happening in terms of either associations like Simodisa or just entrepreneurship outside of South Africa, elsewhere in Africa?
I believe the tipping point is now. I truly believe that Africa is at a point where now this current generation has to be the one that industrializes the continent by beneficiating our resources. I believe that we have what it takes. We have the knowledge, we are educated, we are passionate, and it's a function of redefining our new collective identity as a continent. And that definitely involves integrating ourselves into the rest of the continent. So I have done a fair amount of traveling, within the continent. I found myself in places such as Equatorial Guinea, such as Congo, Kenya, Zambia, and it's always interesting. It actually, South Africa is an advanced country in many aspects, like infrastructure, services. I always find the continent much more interesting because there's bigger opportunities. So I wish that more young South Africans would be as passionate and as excited as I am around all the opportunities that exist on the continent, because a fair amount has been done. Now it's a function of how do we collectively work with our counterparts on the continent.
Right. And do you see any examples of countries that are either creating the environment for innovation especially well, or if you prefer, especially badly?
Well, perhaps we don't like to talk about bad things, but I think Rwanda is definitely a country that has been quite inspirational. Kigali has positioned itself as, it wants to position itself as an innovative city, whereby it promotes technology, whereby it promotes, centers of education and skills. And also they are doing very well in terms of creating this innovation fund. So as much as it might seem as it's emulating the Silicon Valley concept or model, it is necessary that we start positioning ourselves as centers of excellence. So Kigali, for me, definitely has been one country that has now positioned itself and said, we are going to be the most, Kigali is going to be the most innovative city, smart city on the continent.
Right. Education, that's obviously hugely important for this kind, to create the pipeline of people. What do you see as the state of education across
the continent? Well, education, I can speak for South Africa because I'm South African, and we haven't had the best results in terms of how we're educating our young people, how we're educating them to be able to have skills of the future. So in terms of science, technology, we're not doing too well in that regard, but we have recognized that if we're not going to get this right, we are not going to be able to catch on to what Africa is doing. We are not going to be able to leverage on all the opportunities that are existing, and we are not going to be able to build onto what leaders such as Nelson Mandela have created of South Africa. So education definitely does need a little bit of a step up. There's a lot that we can do, and ensuring that education is also inclusive. We have 11 different kinds of languages in South Africa, and so if we're only going to be educating people using English, it's already a barrier. So how do we find means and ways of ensuring that people are able to articulate and to understand in their primary languages, because we want to remove that particular barrier.
Do you have any sense that people who are going abroad for education are seeing more opportunities now and coming back to set up ventures?
Sure, for me, I would never leave South Africa, to be honest. I've traveled the world, been to places like New York, London, but South Africa is still home, especially with the Africa opportunity that we have. especially with the opportunity that, well, we've got to industrialize our continent. We've got all these wonderful resources. They shouldn't leave, all the gold shouldn't leave South Africa, go to China, where it's all made pretty, and then come back to South Africa where it's sold at a premium. Why? We have enough young people that are educated that are now able to ensure that we leverage off those opportunities.
Right, but I'm thinking of, let's say a South African or a Nigerian or someone who has gone and maybe studied in London, let's say, or in New York or wherever, and is thinking to themselves about what they do next. Do you feel like they're seeing more opportunities back home?
Sure. I was a banker. I decided to leave banking, and I see that, well, the financial services sector is doing pretty well for our economy, and you're finding a lot of fintech businesses that are coming out, and a lot of them are former bankers that used to work in London, or former bankers that used to work in banking, in banks in South Africa, and they are seeing a lot of tedious, problems. It's like, well, if I could just fix this or tweak that with an app, why don't we do that? So there's a lot of that that's coming, and it's interesting and encouraging to see that some of them that do come from the Londons are seeing things being done there, and then they're thinking, well, how could we do it in Africa, and how could we customize it to suit Africa? So there's a great opportunity in that regard, and I would encourage all the young Africans to come back, and let's now build this Africa that we all want, because the opportunity is now. I don't see any other time than now where Africa has to really rise.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Matsi, for coming and talking to us.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Please welcome Shiro Oweru, founder and CEO of Fundking Limited, and Yinka Ngoke, Quartz.
Hello? Okay, back on. Okay. Sure. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm a big fan of your work
Thank you.
and your hairdos.
Thank you.
I tried to do one this morning, but it didn't work.
Wrong hairdresser.
But thank you again for being here. We want to talk about your company, Fun Kids, which manufactures furniture for kids, but also just wanted to get into a bit of your story, how one gets to thinking about doing this in Kenya or in Africa, in any of our countries. Do you want to just start with your story? How did we get here?
I guess it starts when I was 9 years old, and I was a creative. I'm still a creative. And I knew I wanted to be a creative, but of course you don't know what you want to do. Fast forward, you go to high school. Our education system does not support children who love creativity. Okay. People look at you like, are you sure you don't want to do something else? Right. You finish, and I went to university. I actually went and studied interior architecture. Okay. And you come back home, and everybody still thinks you're going to be doing something else. You can't possibly have gone to school to do anything to do with design. That's in Kenya, at least. So somebody offered me a consultancy, and I did it well. And before I knew it, I actually had a company. I had no business plan, nothing. And then after that first job, it went so well, I ended up registering a business. Did that for 10 years. I did a lot of work for corporate, the blue chip companies. And I learned,
design work,
yes,
right?
doing design, doing my interior architecture around Africa. And I learned a lot about brands. I was like, these brands, how come we don't create brands? We have businesses, we have small businesses. Right. Fast forward again, expecting our son. We're pregnant, and I went around and I'm thinking, why don't we have anything that I think suitable enough for children? You look at the content on TV, the influences around us for our children. My daughter, who's now 4, our second born, always wants her hair to look different. We have this conversation about how they look versus what they see on TV. I see. And I realized I can use my design to be that change and to be that bridge. So that's why Fun Kids. I design and manufacture products for children that are fun. Who said schools have to look boring? Who said bedrooms have to look like for adults? So that's why we started, and we started with the furniture line first.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have some of the images of some of your work, and it's pretty, it's colorful, it's actually quite, beautiful. Where do you get most of the inspiration from for the work, for these creations?
I think I look at design, everything, literally everything that's man-made is designed.
Okay.
And I look at the use of it first. I always say form follows function. So it's for sleeping, or a previous slide had somewhere you can wash your baby as well. So I look at the functionality of a product. I look at our homes. Our homes are smaller. So like this particular bed has 2 beds and 2 study areas.
I see.
And the stairs are also the drawers. So you look at the functionality of a product, and I design around that. But I make sure it's fun. Children like peeping, so the kids can peep.
Mm-hmm.
I make sure it's safe, because like my son dangles from the bed. So there, those are them, as you can see. So literally they come down the stairs in different ways. So I make sure the stairs are wide enough. The drawers are there. You see, that's how they use their products. So they're actually my head of R&D and VP R&D. So I use them quite a bit just to see how kids behave around spaces, and they have to be fun and safe. And literally, there's so much psychology behind design, color, spaces for kids. So we use that a lot.
Okay.
Use that a lot.
So we've just had a quick conversation about
I'm calm now.
about what is African design, what is African furniture.
Yeah, so people say it doesn't look African enough.
Yes. What do you say to that?
Well, I tell them, what do you mean African enough for kids? We need to stop this putting things in a label and in a box. They're kids. They should be universal. I would love our furniture to be used by a child in Paris and New York, and vice versa. We need to stop saying it's not African enough or Chinese enough. They're my models again. They're kids. And through our design and our products, we really hope to bridge this stereotype gap for kids. And maybe that's why we have some of the situations we have now, because you look African, therefore your furniture must look African.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Okay. A cot is a baby cot. The baby sleeps in it.
Right.
A bed is a bed. So we need to, and we hope using Fun Kids as a brand, we can change all of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I was excited to speak to you, actually there are many reasons I was excited to speak to you. But one of the key was, on the most seriousness, was to talk a little bit about manufacturing. And manufacturing in Africa. And it's in fact, there have been a few studies and books recently about this, about actually Africa's manufacturing base seems to be going backwards. We seem to be making less stuff. We seem to, we're kind of rushing to this kind of services model that the West has, but the West also has enough manufacturing, and they have China. So how difficult or easy has it been to start a factory here in Kenya, and just talk about that process of starting a bit?
It has been extremely hard.
Okay.
Buckets and buckets of blood, sweat, and tears. So that's me. After graduating with interior architecture, I went and studied carpentry in a local school here, because I was like, I don't want to be played by my own team, and I also love knowing how to make things. And those of you in the crowd from Kenya, a fundi can drive you nuts, right? But I was like, but sometimes it's because we don't understand the challenges, literally.
Okay.
So I said, I want to do it myself so I can understand the challenges that there are. Many times people go into businesses without understanding what it actually takes to do it. I sadly did not finish this particular product. It took 2 months. And I thought, I don't think the Chinese take 2 months to make one chair. My right hand was bigger than the other. So I was like, so I went online. I was like, I don't think this is how it's done if I'm to compete globally. As you can see, the classroom was special. That's a classroom, and that's my teacher and my notes on the board. Just so funny. And I researched, and I realized the difference is technology.
Okay.
So the reason why maybe manufacturing on the continent is not yet there is because we don't actually adopt technology in our processes. So that process, as you can see, it's very manual.
Right.
I have now since replaced that particular tool, and we have one that's all digital. We just press it, and the wood goes in and comes out on the other side. And a lot of us are not aware about this. It's hard to manufacture. Again, going back to our school system, we're not taught to manufacture. see. We are consumers as a continent. Everybody in here is probably on their phone, tweeting, or whatever it is, but nobody here has actually made the phone they're using. The chairs we're sat on, all of us, are not made by us. We've consumed all of them, the mics we're using. I keep saying even the toilets we use are not made in Kenya or in Africa. A basic thing like a toilet. The light switches, all the bulbs in here, none have been made on this continent. And I think that's extremely embarrassing. And we should be ashamed of ourselves and change that narrative. The reason why, again, is we haven't dared to do it to that scale. You always find it always has to be simplified into like a nice pot. Again, back to this looks African thing.
Oh, I see.
You don't imagine we can manufacture LED lights in Kenya, for example. So for me, the challenge is uphill, because when I say I manufacture products for children, they always imagine their little teddy bears.
I see.
You know, they don't imagine that we can actually be as big or bigger than, for example, IKEA.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you mentioned technology there, moving forward with technology. And you've certainly been a sort of groundbreaker in trying to employ interested technology in your business. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
So I realized there must be other children like me out there. I have friends, people who don't know, who come up and say, I wish I was able to follow my passion for creativity as a child. And again, and I realize there are many, and people don't realize that in design, you can literally make anything. I remember a guy in uni when I was there, and he designed something called Ring Ring. Just 2 finger rings, Ring Ring. It was a product, and it was about miniature communication device. I was like, what a clever guy. That's Ring Ring, and he was scooped by the Japanese during our degree show, and that changes his life. So I figured, instead of just challenging our education system and complaining about what's not happening, how do I be a positive influence to this? Starting with fun kids. The same child who sleeps in my cot, graduates to a junior bed, needs to learn how to make things. So we started a program called Kids Go Tech under Fun Kids, one of our other sub-brands. And there, they're actually learning how to make their own security devices. So they're learning how to make laser tripwires, intruder detectors, because we've got issues of security. You can't just have a guy standing with this, what we call a rungu, the whole day. I mean, really, this is 2016. So, it just upsets me so much. So we teach kids to answer their own questions and be the solution providers for our own problems. We need to stop being okay with people saying we have slums in Africa. These kids, almost all the slums are in very fancy areas as well. The children themselves can be the ones to upgrade those homes and have better security. They can have their own solar panels, which they can learn to make. Look at the happiness on his face. He made his own light. Can you imagine? And that's just a container where...
Is this, sorry to interrupt, is this a non-profit part of your work, or is this a...
It has 2 arms to it. So the kid before, those who can't afford our program, we pay for them. We get people to donate them for us to pay for it. His parents can pay, but what I do, I put them in the same class. I don't separate, I don't segregate, because they're children and they both learn how to innovate. But we don't examine them like your typical school would. We don't have what you call a normal teacher. We call it a tech buddy. Because again, there's this fear when you hear it's a teacher. And they learn through steps. So if you get it, you miss one step, we ask you just go back. And the whole point is to help you understand why you're doing what you're doing and what's the cause when you do that. So here they're using breadboards. We start from age 6. I mean, I learned about breadboards as an adult. Right, so here they're able to make things, and we tell them after this, you can hook it up to your bicycle or use it at home where the lights go off, so we are no longer at the mercy of what we call Kenya Power only. Children can actually just say, you do you. The parents will be busy tweeting and complaining, customer care, and the kids are fine making their own lights. So we need to start changing that and breaking that monopoly. So we give the kids everything they need when they come for the sessions. And when they make the product, we then ask them to stand in front and explain what they've done. So we work on their confidence, we work on presentation, and some of them come up with company names. and they imagine they're going to have an industry. So watch out, watch out. Yeah, so there you go, very busy.
That's really inspiring.
Thank you.
That's really inspiring.
And we do this, this is on a Saturday morning, 9 to 1, right? And I'm like, and they love it because we're not making them fail. We're just teaching them to understand.
Right.
I mean, is it some time back, America was celebrating some other planet they discovered. I'm like, wow, we still haven't made toilets. And that wasn't a long time ago, I believe it was this year, right? So we have a lot to do. So we're trying to leapfrog that, and we need to do it as a matter of urgency.
And talking about that sort of global picture, your point about going around and seeing brands through your early work as a consultant and then coming to Fund Kids, one of the things that you and I have had in the previous discussion is this idea that Fund Kids is not just a Kenyan brand or an African brand, that you see this as a global brand. I'm fascinated how you, particularly with manufacturing, and particularly with making a product, I don't want to say cumbersome, but you know, not a light, something you could send over the internet kind of product. How you see your business becoming a global brand, just your kind of broad vision, not necessarily the details of your strategy.
Okay. Well, for example, what we make is flat packable. So we use the same technologies or the same hinges and fittings you'll find used in the West. We use your Allen key, so everything flat packs and is able to travel well. We're very, very big in advertising. Michelle Obama, my new cousin.
Yeah, your friend.
My new
She gave
friend.
her a shout out.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys
so, I mean, I've got friends who live outside the country.
Yeah.
Their children are consumers of our products as well. We have people who buy in Kenya, fly them to where they're moving to. We have a lot of customers from the region. We've had people relocate from Kenya and move back to Europe and actually travel back with our products. So it's not as many yet, but we do have customers who actually love our stuff. We have a customer from Dubai recently who's ordering stuff from here because she's like, I can't find what you have in Dubai. And that's a really good thing for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So how does this scale, is what I'm trying to understand. It still feels a little bit craft.
Actually, not at all. What we've done, we did a big investment last year and brought in quite a bit of technology from Germany.
I see.
So it's in the equipment we now have that allows us to scale our manufacturing capacity. So literally, we have CNC routers that you just put in your designs. It works as you progress doing something else. We actually don't paint by hand our products, the designs on them. Excellent. We use printers that print on wood. And they can take board size 8x6. I mean, we have technology that enables us to scale. Our technology cuts to within a millimeter of perfection, to within a degree of perfection. If you want something to be 22.5 degrees, I can guarantee that to you.
So technology is the key here.
Yes, yeah.
It's absolutely key.
Yeah.
We've got to talk about this guy.
Yeah, my third born child.
Yeah.
I have 2 human children and 1 not so human. And his name is Kay, and that's him with actually my niece and my son in the background, and my husband is my business partner. And the idea again is, even an event like this, we could have been reading about everything in print, black or white, but the audience is here experiencing the event. So we're saying, we know there's 3D, 4D, I hear the 7D cinema. Why isn't our classroom like that?
Right.
We fight with our kids, put off the TV, don't watch cartoons, and you're trying to explain to them, we saw a diagram about the body, the anatomy. Do you really know where your spleen is? Do you even know how it works? I mean, have you ever seen a human heart? Right. So why don't we experience technology, experience learning through technology? Michael Jackson, bless him, after his passing, had a concert and sold out as a hologram.
Right.
Can you imagine Shaka Zulu appearing in a history class? I would never forget that lesson. You understand? We did literature and Shakespeare and cobbled streets. Cobbled streets?
Yeah.
You can't even conceptualize what a cobbled street is. So we need to change this, but even just on a more realistic, if you're in Nairobi and you're talking about the tidal wave or the coral and why we must protect it, most children have never even been into the capital. So how are they supposed to understand when you talk about the Rift Valley, how it was formed? How do we do that? It must be through a different way. So Kay, his name is Kay, we're working on this now.
So you made this.
We made this here, and that's the idea. Of course, everybody thought we're crazy, so we made the prototype first. He's not completely working yet. We're working with different people and looking to others who can help us take this to the next level. Children, my son used to have convulsions when he was young. We talked about data earlier, and I never understand why he'd have a convulsion. I've just dropped him in school. But there's nobody in class to see if the child is okay because they're teaching. So with the kids, they'll come in, hug him. That's why we designed him in this shape, because it's cute, huggable. And as they're doing that, there's sensory pads underneath that take the pulse of the child. They can read the temperature. These days, thanks to Ebola, they take your temperature at the airports, right? So with Kay, he can take temperatures of children in class. This becomes data. If a child's temperature drops or rises too high, or heart rate and everything, a parent or caregiver gets an alert immediately on a device. This way, it just makes it easier. I find parenting so hard. We need to design things that make it easier.
That's so impressive. My last question, because we're just going to wrap up now, is just to there you go. Ask about funding for your business or businesses in general in Kenya, particularly because even at this conference, there's a lot of, every time you hear about Kenya and entrepreneurship, it's usually about, internet-related technologies and things like that. This is manufacturing that you're in for the most part.
Yeah.
What is the environment like for funding the manufacturing business?
It's almost non-existent. Most people don't imagine that we have a vision and quality products. Even this morning, we know UNCTAD is happening this week.
Yes.
And there's this private CEO's breakfast. And on the panel is amazing business people from around the world. But people forget, the governments forget that in the same room, in the same country, there's people trying to manufacture to international standards. So when you find all these trade expos and everything, we're ignored because for sure you can't be trying to manufacture. So when there's all these funding opportunities for us, we're nowhere to be seen. For example, even the GES itself, as much as it was held here, it did not focus on people like us who are doing hardware. But for all the software being done, we need hardware. And for us as a continent to grow, we must manufacture. It's embarrassing that tables like these are not made here. We really need to stop looking at
importing everything.
Yeah, and really just can you imagine the jobs we can create? If we're talking about growing this continent, it has to be using hardware manufacturing as well. So we really need funding. It's a big issue. Okay. Yeah.
And on that very inspiring note, I want to thank you again.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Dream detected. Take your dreams present. Dream detected. Take your dreams present.
I found the perfect soil sample and planted the mighty seed. It's growing.
Soil sample.
The one you sent. The box with no delivery note.
I didn't send anything. Reported to security and move on.
This could mean there's life on the outside.
You are not qualified to determine that. Forward your work to the science lab.
I'd like to apply for an exit visa to go outside. If I could find the original soil, I could...
The outside is deep.
But the soil is alive.
Take your dreams, please.
question.
You were compromised by your illness. You should have taken your medication.
I have been taking them.
I can't help you anymore.
What about the plan?
Please welcome Nairobi, award-winning film director.
Hi. Hello, my name is Winnery Kahio, and I live in Nairobi. And I'm going to start out by reading a short story that myself and my co-writer are working on, and then I'm going to talk. So please bear with me. Okay. Rusties by Nnedi Okorafor and Winnery Kahio. And now we've all fled to shags. Unbelievable. We should have really seen it coming. Rusties are so predictable, even sentient ones. We were such idiots, but they are too. It didn't have to happen like this. Still, me, I saw something different. I was there, seeing it with my own eyes. Okay, so maybe I did more than just see. Rusties have been around for like 30 years. Ever since I can remember, my father's been bragging about being in Kinshasa when the first one was installed in 2013. I even know the intersection, and I've never set foot in the Congo. It's at the intersection of Patrice Lumumba, Asosa, and Hiruri Street. My father was there in a business meeting when he saw a crowd gathered at an intersection. When he joined the crowd, he learned that everyone was there for the unveiling of the very first robotic traffic cop. That thing looked crazy, my father said. But we all felt like we were part of the future, standing there sweltering in the sweaty heat and staring at it. Standing at 8 feet tall, its bright silver body cemented in a concrete platform and shining in the sun, the solar-powered traffic robot was anything but rusty. It really was like something out of a science fiction movie, with its swiveling waist, long dextrose robot arms, and large round eyes that housed the 6 cameras located behind it. The city of Kinshasa was plagued by traffic so severe that its very economy was affected. Because of that first traffic robot, within 2 years, Kinshasa was able to join the modern world and compete in the global market. Even more robots were stationed at the local Kinshasa intersections. Then they were upgraded with moderate artificial intelligence in order to process information more effectively and placed in the most traffic-crippled African cities of Lagos, Nairobi, and Cairo. This is where they worked even bigger magic. The thing is, people liked and obeyed the traffic cops more than the human police. Everyone benefited. You clear the arteries of the city's streets, and the city's heart beats stronger and faster. The robot traffic cops used cameras to survey drivers, could electronically deduct your M-Pesa for traffic violations, and could control self-driven vehicles that came within range. Only 2 years after the robot cops were installed, businesses in Lagos, Cairo, and here in Nairobi bloomed. Machines, that's what they were. That's what we saw them as, and that's why it was easy to obey them. We were using them, not deferring or cowering to another human, and they gave us a good service. However, when we upgraded their insides, we left the outsides the same. They were made of ungalvanized steel, and over time they rusted. That's why, decades later, people know them as rusties. I'm in my 20s and I've never known them as anything else. I grew up here in Nairobi on Ndege Road. So I've known the rusty down the road since I was like 5 years old, when I started walking to school. Its official name was Rusty CV3 Ndege Road, but local people called it Rusty Ndege for short. My school was just past that rusty, easily within its range, so my mother never worried about me getting hit by a car, kidnapped, or anything. Rusty Ndege liked me from the first day. The first day we met was my first day at school, and I was in a group of other 5-year-old children excitedly clutching my school bag as we arrived at the intersection. We waited for Rusty Ndege held up its long, thick, rusty arm, which creaked as it lifted. It carried a square light in its hand, and it flashed red. "Do not walk, children," it said in a stiff male voice, as it played Captain Banana's hit Kapuka Dub song, which I loved so much. "Please wait." When it finally allowed us to cross the busy intersection, as we passed its platform, I shimmied my shoulders and happily told it, "Thank you for playing my favorite song, I love it." That was the first time I saw Rusty Ndege's eyes do a brief flash of pink. "You're welcome," it said. Then it paused and it said, "Magana." I beamed, feeling special because it had spoken my name. Two of the girls in front of me gasped and turned around as they walked. "My daddy was there when the first Rusty was unveiled," I said, slowing down. "We weren't so rusty back then," it said. "I know," I said over my shoulder. "My daddy said you were shiny silver like a mirror, but you're smarter now." "Please move along," it said. I smiled, nodded, and off I went to my first day of school. I remember all the kids looking at me like it was such a big deal, as if Rusty Ndege couldn't go into our mobile phones and pluck our personal information right off it. But we were only 5 years old. Rusty Ndege calling my name in that moment on the very first day of school and when I'd ever felt any sort of independence was a big deal to me. From that day on, Rusty Ndege and I had a special bond, me being one of the few people who actually spoke to it as a person. For most, machines were just machines. So I am one half of a creating writing duo. My co-writer is Nnedi Okorafor, who's a celebrated novelist and most recently won a Nebula for her short story, Binti. And we really wanted first to talk about why science fiction is important to Africa. Then we thought, we tired. We're tired of talking about Africa or for Africa. Africa is grown. Africa is multi-layered, multi-peopled, and I'm not Africa's mother. Africa can speak for itself. What I can do is speak for why I feel it's important for us, Nnedi and myself, to be making science fiction, and why it's become important to our families. First, we grew up in pretty similar families in one regard. When Nnedi was really, really young, she was told that when she feels itchy, it's because bacteria is pooing on her. And that was her father's effort to make sure that she bathed and her siblings bathed. In my house, I was told by my mother, who's sitting right here in the front seat, I was told that if you eat too much salt, all the blood in your body rushes through your body and comes out the top of your head. She called it high blood pressure. Now, given my mother's a pediatrician and her father was a cardiac surgeon, we had no choice but to believe them. And that was our first experience of science fiction. So when we made our way through this and we started to really now address the reasons that we make science fiction, in some ways we couldn't exactly say. One, we were drawn to it because it was fun, and for no other reason than because it was fun. And given that although some of our work is political, we don't start with it being political. Sometimes we just start creating for the sake of creation, and then the meaning is attached later. So we wanted to be able to create fun things, even though we know that in this day and age, fun, especially for Africa, and I know I'm speaking for it now, but especially for Africa is a pretty political subject. Given we're not top 10, we're not top 20, we're not even top 30 of the happiest countries in the world. Africa is not in the top 10, top 20, or top 30 this year of one of the top of any of the happiest countries in the world. Actually, the first one is 38, and that's Algeria, but that's a whole different story. So given that fun is political, especially from the continent that we come from, we really write to put fun into people's experience of how they read us, or what they see, or the films that we make, because we believe that fun it's essential. So that when you come to visit Kenya, or when you come to visit any other African country, you can refer to it as that happy place. That place that people go to because they're seeking joy, and they're seeking, I don't know, just general happiness. And not in the way that we say, oh gosh, those Africans, they're poor, but they're so happy. Not in that way, but in a truly, truly human way, in a way that we feel more involved in the continent that we live in and in the world that we're a part of. We also make science fiction because we believe that science fiction has also been rather badly perceived in Africa. We've been asked questions like, with so many other real stories to make of Africa, why would you make a science fiction film? And we've been asked questions like, is it easy to blend African with science fiction? And that has always been curious to us, because as far as we know, science and Africa have never been separate. As far as we know, pyramids were built in Africa, which is science fiction-y as anything, right? But also our language and our culture and our creation myths. I'll give you an example. In Mali, the Dogon believe that they are descendants of aliens from a planet called Sirius B. That's science fiction-y. In South Africa, there's a man called Credo Mutwa who believes that we're descendants of reptiles. Today, I actually found out that the word Zulu is not necessarily sky as many people perceived it to be, but rather the space between. So even in the language, we were able to explain the space between, and this is beyond the sky, the space between. Here in Kenya, we have superheroes, and we believe who we believe existed. And we believe one of our superheroes, like Luanda Magere, was killed by his beloved when she stabbed his shadow. These are all science fiction, fantasy, speculative ideas that existed far beyond our existence. So science fiction has always been a part of us. So it doesn't feel like it's separate. So when we tell stories of a science fiction nature, given the parents that we had, but when we tell stories of a science fiction nature, we're just the next line of science fiction storytellers that have always existed. We're not separate. We're just continuing in the lineage. We also believe in imagination. And imagination is amazing. All of the speakers who've been here before us have talked about the ability to imagine things, imagine problems, imagine a future, imagine solutions to problems. And without the strength of that imagination, without having an imagination, without allowing space for that imagination, we lose hope. And we need hope, not only because we need to hope for a better future. We need to hope for a better Africa. We need to hope for more than we are. But also, we hope that we create because we have children that we leave behind. Neddy and I are both mothers. And we have children who celebrate our work. Right now, Anya, Neddy's daughter, is in the middle of reading one of her books, Who Fears Death, and swears it's her most favorite book in the whole world that has ever been written. We also write so that our children can see themselves not only in the movies that we watch, but also read of themselves in the books that they read, and so that they have a place within this humanity of telling. And because so often in our own lives, we have been written out of our histories. So we want to write our children into our futures so that we make sure that there is a place for them when they come into imagining themselves in the future. And so that we leave a hopeful future for them, so that finally when they stand on our shoulders and reach higher than we are, they can reach for more and greater and better. Thank you so much for listening.
Please welcome the senior editor, Quartz.
This is a session I've been looking forward to a lot because I'm a huge science fiction buff, and I've even tried to write some myself, not very well. Picking up on what you said, there's an American science fiction writer, Neil Stephenson, who recently made a call for science fiction, and he was talking about American science fiction, to get more optimistic, basically. He said, it used to be the case in the 60s, let's say, that science fiction writers were a source of inspiration to technologists and to scientists, and indeed, some of the technologies that we have today were first conceived in science fiction books. And he felt like science fiction had lost its way. It had become very dystopian. It had been all about how bad science and how technology is, how terrible future it will lead to. And so what his call for a new breath in science fiction, trying to make it more optimistic again, or at least more visionary again, it resonates for me with what you were saying there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is space for that, and also just space for imagining for the sake of imagining. I want to be in that space where we're actually talking about the different types of science fiction. We're not even there yet. I think just talking about science fiction in itself is huge, and to the point that it's been lumped into this one big melting pot of Afrofuturism, which is speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and mythical realism. Everything has kind of been lumped into one thing so that it can easily define anybody who's doing anything out of the box and who is of African or Black origin.
Right. There's a book that I've only just started reading called Nigerians in Space by Deji Olokotun. And it's, so you're already laughing at the title because you think, well, Nigerians in space? And I think it's from the little I read already in the summary, I know that it's trying to get at that same idea. Okay, well, why not Nigerians in space? And it's fun. It's making fun a little bit, but it's also about a crazy ambition and what could come out of it.
I think there's actually a Nigerian space program in progress at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
So maybe it's closer than we think.
I wonder how close it is to the plot of the novel, which I will not give away. One of the things that struck me, by the way, about the story that you were reading just now, I read another of Nnedi's stories, which is about artificially intelligent robots that guard oil pipelines.
Yes.
And so in both of those stories, there's a theme to me of, essentially robots that can be trusted more than people.
Well, strangely enough, these robots were actually inspired by the actual robots that exist in Kinshasa. In Kinshasa right now, there's 3 robots that help man intersections. And they play songs, they sing songs, they give instruction, and they kind of like control traffic. And there, they are trusted more than human police, which is not hard to imagine right now.
But it's a completely opposite vision of, if you read American science fiction stories about robots, it's usually about the robots turning on us and destroying us. And it's sort of, again, it feels like that, well, why not imagine a different path?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully they are, I truly believe that if we create, the only way that technology can turn is if we create them without flaws. So if we're imagining a flawed human being, then we will create flawed technical beings. So if maybe we impose a more holistic idea of ourselves and a more holistic idea of ourselves within this environment and saving this environment and being mothers of Mother Nature, then maybe the results of that, the technology that comes out as a result of that will also be holistic.
Yeah, there's a saying by a historian of science, Melvin Kranzberg, that says technology is neither good nor bad, but nor is it neutral. In other words, you can be a tech optimist or a tech pessimist, but the thing to remember is always that technology does act as a function of the people who are implementing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much for coming and reading
so
to us and talking
here.
about your vision.
Thank you.
Thank you to Onuri. And thank you to all of you. I now have a few remarks that I'm supposed to make, and I'm trying to remember what they are. But basically, thank you to all of you for being here and for listening to our wonderful innovators. Thanks to the speakers themselves. Thank you to the audience that's watching on the live stream and to everybody who helped put this event together. We're now going to move to the more entertaining section. We have cocktails out on the terrace. We're going to have a performance by Blinky Bill. And then after you've been drinking for a while, we'll be calling you back in, trying to drag you back in to have dinner. And when you're coming back in from the terrace, you'll be shown which tables you're assigned to. And then at dinner, we'll have the keynote speech by Augusta Lico. So go drink. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.